Okay, we're recording.
All right, so again, welcome to the NEMSIS v3 implementation call, March 27, 2019. Pleasure to be with you. We have some great things to discuss. We're making some great strides towards the completion of the additional draft products associated with version 3.5.0. We get to begin to talk about the rollout of those things today. So that's actually great news. Let's go ahead and start with the first topic here, and that is testing the ability for field-level EMS products to correctly consume a state data set and to test that during compliance testing. Laurel, who does our compliance testing, folks know Laurel, and she's going to kind of share the topic with me. I'll begin by just providing a little bit of background and kind of warming us up to having this discussion. So as folks know, the state data set is an integral part of the NEMSIS standard. It is not required, not tested for now in compliance testing, but we provide a process on our website for states to provide and develop a state data set. Basically, the value of a state data set, just briefly again, is that it identifies all of the resources and components associated with a state EMS system and allows that data to be shared easily with field level products that choose to work in that state. If a state wants to update the facilities that receive EMS patients or the agencies that actually care for and transport those patients, they can make those changes to the state data set, and then vendors are able to easily update their lists and the resources for a state by just accessing the new state data set from our library. So it just makes it easy for the vendors to stay completely current in regards to their ability to ensure their software has all the right resources within a state for EMS care. And it's also easy for the state to communicate that out to vendors by only having to make that change and announcement once. As folks know, with version 3.5.0, the decision was made based on stakeholder feedback to have the state data set be a mandatory part of state-level EMS data collection systems. What we haven't talked about is potentially having the requirement for version 3.5.0 that field-level products be able to consume a state data set, and that we're able to test for that in compliance. If folks would just check to make sure their phones are muted, that would be really helpful. We're getting a little bit of feedback from a couple of folks. Laurel, anything you want to add to just the background to this topic?
No, I think you did a good job of covering what we're asking about.
Okay.
What do we want to do at that stage? What's is this like a Schematron file where you're going to add it in dynamically?
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be like a Schematron because it wouldn't provide any validation, but we would ask that the software be able to somehow get the information out of a state data set. Because so my thought was, if we're going to require state softwares to be able to create these state data sets, that's great, but if no one is able to use them, then it's maybe, it only sort of does half the work. So if we require that local software can somehow use a state data set file to set up the configuration.
I guess, so two questions. One is this existing files from the repository? Because we do things with those, but not like, you can't just log in and push up your state data file. We have them, sitting in a repository on our server side. Is it, so in Schematron, I brought up Schematron because, the requirement is we can add a Schematron file at any time into the product and have it run those validations. Are you asking for something like that?
I don't think it would need to be that instantaneous. Because the state data set files are still going to be delivered in the same way. They'll just be in the repositories on the NEMSIS site. But I think that what we'd be looking for is that if you through some mechanism received one, that you would be able to get that information into your software.
And so what information's generally for a field level, you don't need the whole thing. You're going to pick and choose, your favorite 10 facilities, and
right.
That's most of what you want. So what's your expected output given a full state data set file?
I think the biggest thing would be probably the configuration section, and then the I can't remember what it was called before, but it's called S element 01 and 350, and it's the state collected elements, so that the listing of what elements the state requires. So that sort of configuration. I mean, obviously you're not going to need all 1,100 facilities maybe that a state has given. So I would find that less concerning. But the custom element setup sections, the configuration sections, and the state required element sections, those would be, I think, what I would be looking to see was implemented.
Okay, so we're talking about dynamically pulling in custom elements then?
Yeah, so there's the E custom configuration and D custom configuration are present in the state data set. So if a state put custom elements in there, I would want to see that a vendor could pull that information out. Clay has the dictionary pulled up right now, so you can sort of see how the state data set looks under 350.
Right. So we've had the custom configuration requirement for a while now, but it didn't have to be done dynamically from the state data set or anything like that. We were able to implement it, offline, if you will.
Right. I mean, if it's going to be a lot of work to maybe pull that information across, I could certainly be talked out of thinking this is a good idea. But from our perspective, the data elements for, say, SE custom configuration, it's the same as E custom configuration. So when you're, so I would think that you'd just be able to pull the data across from what's in the state dataset XML to what's going to go into what will eventually be your EMS dataset XML, because the structure is the same. But if it's not that simple,
I don't think it's really that simple now.
That's unfortunate, because we tried to make it as similar as possible in the state dataset.
I mean, what we've done in the past, since these are, the custom element for compliance testing was not a real element; it was a sample.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was made for compliance testing and didn't need to be out of the blue, just new elements in the data set.
Those are great comments, David. That's actually the reason why we're discussing this, is to see perhaps the value of this, and then perhaps how it might be implemented. Do other folks have ideas in regards to this topic? Of course, we not only want state data sets to be able to generate them, but we'd love to have field products be able to digest them. So I think the topic is worth discussing. I interrupted somebody. Sorry about that.
Hey, Clay, it's Keenan.
Hey, Keenan.
On the surface, we're sort of the opinion that the inclusion of this into sort of the testing is sort of opening the door for all of the softwares to be, I guess, mandatorily going to be able to consume those state data set files. And so we've built something that does this, and we've found that there's significant issues that we face when we went to implement it. Mostly if there's something incorrect in the data set, in the state data set file, there's no good recourse. So we find ourselves not being able to just simply pull them in and generate fields and facilities and stuff like that, because if it's not structurally sound, our system is designed to not actually process it. Then there's something that I think David touched on, is sort of the local configuration. And so if I bring in all of Colorado's facilities, that's all well and great, but if my organization only does a facility or a handful of facilities, then it's sort of all for naught. And I have concerns for not only us as an organization, but as smaller vendors and their ability to consume these data set files and have to sort of manage when they're wrong or when they change. And I think it's burdensome.
Yeah, Keenan, thank you.
Hey.
Yeah, please.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut anyone off. I was going to speak. This is Adam. I agree. I like Keenan, we have something that processes not fully functional yet, but the process state data set. I think there's a lot of benefit for us as vendors to use the state data set file. I like the idea here that showcasing some mechanism that we can consume it, but we each kind of have our own change control process on how these get implemented. So I like the idea. It's just in the definition of what the acceptance testing will be. So, I mean, if it's even if it's kind of a check mark accreditation that we self say that we import the state data set, or if we just show that it on some demo that it gets loaded into some semblance of tables, which out with a really light kind of compliance check. I see where you're going with it. I just don't want it to be too restrictive because of how we apply these to our customers, how we do our change control, how we alert people to potential changes, all that kind of thing might make how we make these things live different across all the vendors.
Thanks. That's really helpful. I kind of can't understand what it would be like for a vendor sitting here at the TAC, having no idea how most of your softwares work. So can I ask anyone who's willing to share with me, how exactly do you use the state data set files as they're currently available? Do you guys access them on our website? Do you pull down the XML? Are you using them as field vendors?
So we do. We use them to interpret the needs of the state when it comes to the custom elements. And in some of our products, we do actually take that data set file and create custom elements and pick lists and stuff like that off of those lists. But we have to fix the list before we ever do that, because probably a quarter of the list aren't actually correct to the needs of the state.
Okay.
So Keenan, this is Clay. Let me ask a quick question. That is, this discussion is really insightful. When you say that the file isn't correct, are you saying that it's structurally not correct, or are you saying that perhaps the information that's included is not up to date or in some way not complete?
Both.
Okay.
So there are states where if you go into the builder will let you say, just for example, not include eCustom configuration.03, right? Which we expect to be structurally there because it's mandatory in that group. So there's stuff like that. And then there's other states where they may maintain a list of a pick list, so to speak, of inside of a certain element, and we know that their actual state pick list may have 300 selections, whereas the one that's published on the NEMSIS site may have 130.
So it sounds like there's some inaccuracies in the state data sets that are coming out of the builder.
Correct.
Okay. We are going to have some stronger validation under 3.5 because these are going to come in through a web service. They'll validate against a stricter XSD and then a Schematron. So I hope we will clear some of that up and they'll become more useful in that respect. As an example, the custom configuration 03 is mandatory. one-to-one if you specify custom elements. So there really shouldn't, no one should be able to send us a state data set that's missing that in 3.5. But I can see where you're coming from with not wanting to implement it if you're currently seeing issues. So it sounds like having field level software accept the state data set as a compliance requirement might make more sense in a later revision after we've maybe gotten a little better at validating them and making sure that they have what is necessary.
Yeah, we've also toyed with the fact here at the TAC there are some aspects of the standard where it may be of value just to indicate that there are attributes of the system that are used and applicable in this version of the software. So maybe something like Adam indicated, where we just have some type of a process that just identifies that this product makes use of it, may be helpful.
What value would that be to the TAC and to the customers, the end users who are selecting?
Yeah, great question, Keenan. I think from the state perspective, the use of a state data set is seen as valuable, not by all states. As you know, not all states have kind of bought into the idea and actually provide one. But for those who do, I think they find it incredibly helpful, and it's a time saver and ensures standardization. So perhaps if there are attributes of the NEMSIS standard, I mean, other things that are going to be coming out of course are like the API performance measures and things like that. Clearly things that are not mandatory to be used, but it may be valuable if states feel like the state data set is something that they want to implement to know whether or not a product is going to use it.
I'll add on to that. At the TAC, we would find this valuable so that we could do some reporting maybe off of some of these values. We already have some reports that are off of state data set, but we could certainly do a better job if it's mandatory. We're also asking for the name of the software package that created the state data set, which will allow us to provide some reporting back to those state software vendors on what we're seeing from them and how they maybe compare to other software vendors. We haven't really fleshed out all of the ideas, but it'll allow us to do some more robust state reporting.
Also, so this is one. There's a few elements that are missing in the e-custom configuration section that would help describe some of the issues with custom elements. For example, when we extend an element, it's hard to, and it only repeats one time. So the recurrence is one, but it's extending an element that's in a group, and the group can repeat multiple times, but it doesn't give you a way to specify that.
So Juan, can you restate that? It sounded like you were talking about the addition of a UUID into the custom configuration section. Is that what you're saying?
Not a UUID, but a way to specify that an element can repeat multiple times.
Oh, okay.
Because it's in a group, but it can only repeat one time in that group. So like you extend an element in eVitals. Well, in the eVitals section, you only want it one time for that in one vitals group, but the eVitals can repeat multiple times. You can have it multiple times.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, thanks, Juan. That's a really good thought. We'll take that back and discuss it here. That's a really good thought.
And I guess the idea is to be able to have a programmatically consumable form of the data dictionary, whereas the PDF is is okay if you can spend the time going through, you know, hundreds of pages of description of these things. But that often there's a translation gap between that and your actual software. So more adoption by the field providers means, you know, more incentive for the state to publish the state data set, and I think that's part of the value proposition as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
David,
we're not going to need a lot of incentive if it's mandatory for the state software to generate it under 3.5. We would
having the software generate and having the state go in and configure it are different things though too.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's a good point.
Well, and sometimes we do see a difference between the PDF file and what's in the state schematron. Because sometimes the intention of the rule is written in the data dictionary or the data set, and the schematron has it written differently, so it's not, they don't always agree. And that might help, this might help with that as well.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I think
yeah,
we have requests from states that I look at their schematron rules, and I'm not a schematron expert, so there's not a lot I can do there to make sure that their rules are sensible and valid. So it would be a good thought to find ways to make schematron to help states make more accurate schematron rules, because I have had that expressed to me before as a concern.
Yeah, we've gone through a few rounds of that, even as recently as this month, where the rule was not doing what the state wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I could look at them, but when I receive 2 or 3 a day, that could easily consume my entire workday. So I'm not sure how to solve that one either, but I have heard that concern.
I think one of the things that we sort of brought up earlier that sort of goes straight into what we just talked about as far as schematrons is, my concern is if we start making this a mandatory thing where all of the vendors across the board are able to consume this and sort of process this file and make it be, all we are doing is increasing the likelihood that we will take something inaccurate and publish it out to our end users. And that's my big concern, and that's what keeps me up at night.
Well, and I might argue, you know, both ways. I think from a state perspective, we certainly see, you know, when data comes in from multiple agencies. Sorry, Eric from Colorado. From time to time, you'll see things, as you know was mentioned, like facilities. If we have multiple facilities with similar names, we certainly will see data occasionally come in that the facility code is not matching the facility address that we're seeing come in. So I think our hope, you know, from our perspective, is that this would give a way that maybe that would have a more standardized flow, or there might be less prone for errors within that. So I think our hope is really that this would be a way to try to eliminate some errors as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're doing the same thing for PDF, you have so much more room for error than this way, because you can write unit tests and have, you know, the standard files that you expect this one to pass, this one to fail in this way, and you can do so much more robust testing before you push it out than with a PDF.
Those are great comments. This is again Clay. Any other folks want to weigh in on this idea of somehow looking to ensure that field level products can consume a state data set? These have been really good comments. I think they can help us in our decision making here. Other comments?
Hey, this is Doug in Nebraska.
Hey, Doug.
As a state person, it concerns me that there's not a central point where the state of Nebraska can place information that multiple vendors in our state can go to and get the same requirements. So, you know, there's got to be a way for us as a state of Nebraska to communicate that, and the vendors that are in Nebraska, that we know they are meeting a Nebraska standard.
Right. I know Nebraska makes really good use of the state data set. I know you folks work hard to keep it right up to date, and I think you're saying that proves valuable for you.
That's exactly what I'm saying. You know, and then our own vendor can, I don't know how they do it, but you know, then all the vendors are getting what we as the state set as data standards.
Yeah, correct.
No matter what it is, like a facility name change, simple thing like that, or an address or whatever. It's important to make.
Exactly.
Have you guys put out requirements that are going to be required for what the data set builder is going to need? For example, each data element, it's a mandatory element, is it not a mandatory element? Are those requirements out there?
So
they will
sort of. So if you're fluent in the XSDs, you could scroll through the XSD for state data set, which is committed to our Git repository. We're going to have a draft data dictionary out for the candidate release soon. There are quite a few mandatory elements, but not things like agencies or facilities or custom elements.
And when is that going to be out?
The candidate release is supposed to be out before the end of May. So I don't know if Clay has a more specific date than that.
Yeah, no, that's our deadline to have it out. I think we'll have it out before, perhaps before then. But we'd love to have it out prior to the NEMSIS meeting, just so that folks know that it's there and we can speak to it and refer to it while we're in our meeting. So we're well on our way to doing it. I just briefly shared the second revision of the web-based data dictionary. You can see here that it now will include state data set, and all of those values are listed here. As Laurel mentioned, it's very similar to what's available in the Git repository if you want to take a look there. We have made some changes here, I think, that will be valuable, and we're really hoping to have that finished up in like the next 3 weeks or so. So hopefully it'll be out and folks can take a really good look at this and the other changes to the standard before the meeting and then during the meeting. So yeah, great question, Juan.
And Clay, this is Jen. I'm going to be asked what the definition of consume is, I am sure. So when it says to correctly consume a state data set, are you talking about importing it directly into the software, or are you talking about making sure that the state data set is correctly represented in the software, or exactly what do you mean by consume?
Yeah, and that was the very reason for this discussion. I appreciate that, Jen. I don't think we were trying to define it at all. We went back through the requests that were associated with version 3.5.0, and this idea was mentioned, but it was not a formal topic that was discussed during the development of 3.5. So how this would actually work, if it's important to do it at all, if we're just going to indicate that software can or can't do it. I mean, I think this discussion has been helpful for us. So is not a formal part of version 3.5.0. It wasn't voted on by stakeholders or things like that. We just noticed it as we were moving forward that it seemed like a gap that we should at least talk about. So we're not trying to define it yet at all. And in fact, the discussion has been helpful to help us understand that maybe some kind of a mechanistic definition to being able to consume a state data set may not be the way to go. So we'll gather together just our IT team and discuss the comments on this call, and then we'll come back with some recommendations, and we'd love to discuss this on the next call again. So I know that doesn't help a lot, Jen, but we just wanted to bring it up as maybe something that we should consider, and there's been good discussion. Does that help you?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. That was a really helpful conversation. Thank you for speaking up and sharing your thoughts. That's been incredibly helpful. Let's move on to agenda item number 2, if we can, just to make sure we can able to get through all 6. Julianne, do you want to take this next item?
Sure, I'd love to. So on our last call, we brought up the idea of NEMSIS providing and developing some products to support the transition into version 3.5. Some of the things that we discussed was some transition videos, starting with e-disposition 12. That'll be our first one that we push out. Other products we talked about were webinars, Train the Trainer series, flowcharts or infographics, conference presentations. Are there things that have proven valuable to your agencies and to your customer base, to the states, different products that have proven valuable and useful in teaching and transitioning to a new platform or something like that? Are there proven methods that you guys would like to see us push out?
They have any the backporting XSL file perhaps? So take a 3.5 and turn it into 3.4? Or I'm not sure how useful that is. If there's any plans for that.
To show the difference, the backfill from 3.5 to 3.4, is that what you mean?
So if a state is still on 3.4, but the state repository takes in a 3.5 file, they could still store it in 3.4. Something like that.
Yeah, David, this is Claire. I think you're just talking about the translation tools, right? Like an XSLT that will move between the 2 standards. Is that what you're talking about?
Right.
Yeah, we'll provide those. Those will be available. I think a good example of what Julianne's talking about is we heard loud and clear as states and vendors were moving from V2 to V3 that there was lots of resources spent on just education and trying to get folks to recognize not only the value, but the actual changes that were present. And so what we've been thinking about doing, and Julianne described this well, is like having just short videos, like for e-disposition 12. We don't know how the e-disposition section for 3.5 is going to look in each of the software, but we can do a short video that for example, talked about the limitations in e-disposition 12 and 3.4.0, why there were certain types of calls that just could not be correctly classified in that. Could folks make sure that they are muted? We're hearing a female voice speaking over the conversation. So just having short videos, for example, that would describe, yeah, there were limitations associated with e-disposition 12. Some calls you couldn't even correctly classify because there just wasn't the options available. Now we've made changes in 3.5 that now allow you to clearly indicate the disposition of the patient, of the crew, of the transport, and of the through these new elements, and that your ability to clearly classify a type of call should be improved. So just something like that, right? So as you're educating as a vendor or as a state, you can say to your stakeholders, watch this watch this 2-minute video provided by NEMSIS. It will describe the purpose and what the changes look like. So doing that for major components within 3.5 that represent kind of important changes. We could have a video that talks about the number of national elements that were dropped, the number of fewer elements that are now required to be collected on every call, things like that just are positive and are helping folks to recognize that we're trying to make their jobs easier and we're trying to make their ability to document clearer. So that's kind of one idea. That's short videos that could be built into education. Are there other things, I guess, is what we're trying to elicit? Other kind of ideas is you have to go out as a state or as a vendor and get people to understand the change. What else can we provide to help with that?
This is Jen. I think the videos are great. But I would love to see even just a 1-page handout, maybe something that comes out like every other week or once a month or something that says, this is what 3.5 can, this is what the 3.5 improvements are going to do for you, kind of a thing. Like you said, with the e-decision 12, it's going to improve the data collection on determining exactly how the call for unit and personnel and the patient. These are the elements that came out, like you said, but these are the elements that we added these values to so you could better document. Just something that maybe takes each one and breaks it down rather than a whole video that they have to watch that they probably won't, but something that we could send them that would be short and sweet. Something that we could post on a board even, for the crews to see. Now, half of them won't read it, or 3/4 of them won't read it, but some of them might. Something like that we could actually get down and not just have our supervisors and agencies looking at it, but our actual crews.
Jen, this is Julianne. That is a great idea. Just a short, sweet, bite-sized chunks. Is that kind of what you're envisioning?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me throw some of those together and we'll see what you think, if I'm headed down the right direction for what you have in mind, and see if something like that is helpful to you. It's a great idea.
Play from a state perspective, any way that we can present to our providers that the NEMSIS has changed and is making their job easier and faster and not more difficult, will save us at the state level a lot of grief.
All right, I'm taking notes. And that was Dag.
This is Hank from Massachusetts. Just one simple thing, I completely agree of having the videos be very short and accessible, just so people can kind of zoom in, do whatever, look for 1 minute at whatever specific thing they had a question about. One thing, I don't know how much workload it'll add for you guys, but to have kind of whatever script or either transcript or even a short bulleted list of what's kind of going on in the video underneath. Some people are just going to want to skip the video and just kind of look through it of kind of a refresher. I know for me personally, I tend to prefer that over kind of watching 1 to 20-minute videos. So that might just make it a little bit more accessible.
That's a great idea, and we can totally do that, Hank. I think that's really valuable, especially if the video is of any length at all, to be able to just skip to that piece, see what they want to see, and move on. It's a great idea. Thank you.
It's Eric from Colorado, and yeah, we would appreciate anything like that as well. We do a monthly data webinar with our agencies and vendors here, so that would be a great resource eventually when we get moving around to 3.5 to be able to start introducing those things early to those folks.
Great, Eric. Thank you. So I think we've got some good platforms. This has been incredibly helpful. I think we can get some draft stuff out and kind of circulate that. I think that's a good idea, Julianne. Maybe on the next call we can kind of show some structures and see what folks think. That sounds great. Okay, fantastic. Let's move on to item 3 just to make sure we can get through our agenda. Okay, Lisa, do you want to talk about the V3 Cube?
Sure. And Clay, if you would stop sharing, then Julianne can grab the screen.
Great.
We're going to actually partner on this item. So many of you guys probably received an email from me Friday night, but we are live with the beta version of the V3 Public EMS Data Cube. So we're very pleased to announce that and make that available. We're already receiving some great feedback, and we hope to hear from many, many more folks. And with that feedback, we're going to implement bug fixes, changes, enhancements, and then redeploy a new and improved version of the cube. And that's going to happen between 4 and 6 weeks from Friday. So does anybody have any questions about just kind of the cube being available, ready for your use? Okay, so I'll ask Julianne to share her screen and talk a little bit about some support and some how-to items that she's in the process of developing to support you all using the cube. And then Julianne, I think you can just click share at the bottom of the screen.
All right, I am not seeing that.
Okay, I will come right over. Just
okay,
1 second.
Come over and show me. Okay. So from the website, you're going to be able to go directly to, let's find this. From the website, you're going to be able to go directly to the V3 Cube and access it with either the public credentials. Okay, thank you. Either access it with the public credentials or your state credentials. We're going to pull that up. Lisa's going to show it. There we go. All right. Can you guys see where Lisa is? Okay. Yeah. So she went over to View Report and down to EMS Data Cube and pulled up the EMS Data Cube page. You can access the cube straight from there in that red box. Username will be NEMSIS Public, and password is NEMSIS@TAC with a capital N. And if you click Login, it takes you to that landing page. Up in the corner, you've got Design. When you click on that, it lets you select OLAP Report. And OLAP is the technology that powers our cube. Click Connect to Cube. And from this menu, you can either choose the version 2 public data or the version 3 public data. And now that the version 3 is up and running, that's everything from 2017 through 2019. So I'm going to have Lisa choose public 3, or the version 3 public cube, and click OK. And that takes you into the cube. From here, you can select your measures, you can select your elements, and filter through your variables. If you'll click count of events, let's show them. There we go. So as of January 1st, 2017 to today, that is the count of events, how many EMS activations are in the data cube for you to filter through and look through, see what information is available to you. Now, for the easy to follow videos, which we're going to be producing, you got the preview to the first video that's coming. Where Lisa's arrow is, it says NEMSIS V3 EMS Cube Data Dictionary and Resources. There's going to be a list of 5 videos there, and it's just going to be a primer. They're going to be short, sweet, to the point, and they will be cumulative. You won't have to start over on each one. You'll be able to just pick, all right, I need to know how to access the cube. It's going to take you 2 minutes. Here's how you access the cube. Then we're going to build a report, clarify the elements and the variables, design a graph, and export your data. So just 5 A, B, C, D, E, simple, easy primer videos on, you know what, let me get into it, and then figure out the basics, and then we'll develop some more materials to show you how to really dig into that data with multiple variables and dimensions. That's the beauty of this cube, is that we can pull apart multiple variables to get to some of these ideas of what we want to see in whether it's policy or protocol or response, who's doing what, how is it happening, those types of things. And the tools that we'll provide will be able to take you from that very beginner level, and most of you are probably way past that beginner level. Now we'll develop things that can really show you how to pull apart, tease out that information that you need from all that great data that your providers are putting into the system, and really be able to show how valuable their hard work is when they're doing those PCRs.
Thank you, Julianne.
Well, thank you for showing your screen.
Yeah, sure. We'll do some training between now and the next meeting.
Yes, thank you.
Does anyone have any questions or comments on this version of the cube?
How do we get permission to it?
So if you're, everybody can have permission. This is open to the public, and the username, NEMSIS Public, and the password's right here. So you just click Connect to EMS Data Cube, and you can access the cube.
Yeah, Lisa, this is, I think Juan is speaking about the state-specific cube.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Oh, okay. So first, the state-specific cube for V3 is not available yet. That will be coming out shortly after we finalize this first version of the cube. The access to the cube is tied to your account into NEMSIS. So state data managers, and there's 2 or 3 other folks from the state offices that would be granted this access to see their state-specific information. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Clay.
You bet, you bet. Yeah, so for the most part, 80 accounts as they currently exist across all the states will just be carried over to the V3 cube. Okay, great. Any other questions about the release of the V3 cube? This is exciting to see it. The videos that Julianne will provide will be incredibly helpful, just because the V3 cube is a little bit more complex in that version 3 has lots more, for example, one-to-many elements, right? So how we portray that in the cube has been a really important task for us to accomplish. I think we've done a good job with it. So I think it'll be incredibly valuable. I'm really excited for its release. It should be well used by researchers and those just wanting to take a quick look at the data. All right, so let's move on to item 4. This is just a quick item. Just wanted to bring this up as we move closer to the Canada release of 3.5, and as we move closer to the NEMSIS spring meeting that's happening in May in Salt Lake City. We field a fair number of questions where, of course, anxiety is rising a little bit about the release of a new standard. We try, of course, to let remind people that the rollout is much slower than they've experienced in the past. So to try to dampen some anxiety a little bit, just to remind them that we're still on track. This was agreed upon, and we're still meeting our deadlines, and so that they can expect it to roll out in this fashion. One of the questions we hear a lot, and we have a really hard time of verifying or denying, is what would be the tangible cost from the software side associated with the migration. We of course, as usual, will not tip our hat into that arena at all, but we just wanted to let the vendors know that we certainly see stakeholders asking those questions, and so we'd hope that you would be communicative as well as folks begin to think about what would be required for a migration. So just want to make sure that we're all trying to provide as much information as quickly as we can, so folks can feel like they're well prepped. So I just wanted to mention that. I'm gonna move on to item 4, if I could, just real quick. This is one of the meatier things we wanted to talk about, and that is that we have completed a draft of the Schematron rules that will be associated with version 3.5.0. So let me kind of dig into that just real quickly. This will be kind of an important piece for us to get through. As folks will remember, Josh did a lot of focus groups with states, with vendors, with actual agencies, talking about what we could do to improve the Schematron file and the associated business rules, also called asserts. And I just wanted to go over a quick list of the general things that we have addressed with these new rules. And this is a document that provides a narrative of all of the revisions to the rules. We'll be posting this to the website. Maybe I can just show you real quickly where that will probably, where that will live. Is just if you go to the beginning website, there's always, we've had this link up for the past year to follow the V3 revisions here. You've had the ability to look at why we're moving, what's in the revision, when will the changes take place, how can we follow along. We'll add a new tab here that just provides you with the latest candidate versions that you can review. So it'll be placed here under a new tab, and there you'll find the dictionary and other things as they roll out. Now it will be the Schematron rules. So let me just go over these general requirements real quickly. Many of these will sound like you've heard them before. Here listed is the JIRA that you can access to actually look at this request from stakeholders, and this is our fulfillment of these requests. So first of all, there was a request that we limit the asserts or business rules to only include national elements, and that would be the basis for the national Schematron file. So we have followed that advice. We have removed all the asserts, all the business rules that included any element that was not a national element. Second, we've added some asserts to help to ensure that we have correct universal unique IDs being rolled out in version 3.5. We have also, under item in row 4, we've evaluated all of the rules, and we have now made it so that all the rules that can throw an error are related to a technical or structural attribute of the file. So no more can errors be thrown and a file be rejected if a provider has made a mistake in his reporting. Those are now all warnings. So this should help a lot. So for example, Doug in Nebraska or Ann in Arizona, if they're seeing that files are failing, then they can immediately feel like that is an issue that they can address with their software vendor. And they can evaluate the warnings knowing that they can now see all the data that is submitted by their providers, and even if there are some some mistakes in their recording and reporting, those will all be presented to them, and the files won't fail, and they'll be able to review the warnings. Next on the list is no more are these asserts or business rules patterns. So where you had one rule that dealt with all of the relationships between all the elapsed times in the record, now all those times are spelled out into individual business rules with individual messages. So there's no more where a pattern can be thrown and the message that is provided back to the providers does not distinctly indicate what the problem is. It'll be much clearer now. We have provided some constraints to some national elements, and so some new rules for some national elements that we just neglected to include in the past. There's just a couple of those. We've rephrased all of the business rules, the narrative that is provided to our providers as a warning is thrown. We've rephrased those to be clearer and more kind of just user-friendly, just layperson-friendly. And then, of course, we've shortened the assert IDs. In this Excel spreadsheet that you'll have access to on that location I mentioned on the website, we have the rules that we are proposing for the state data set. Those are here under this tab. Here is the associated element, whether it's an error or a warning. Here's the text we propose to show. And then here's whether this is a new rule or a revision of an old rule, and just kind of some comments that will help you to be able to see why a change was made. So of course, the rules associated with the state data set are all new. These are the rules that Laurel spoke about that will help with the integrity of the file. Here are the DEM data set rules, and it's a short list. Here's whether it's an old rule or a new rule. Some rules are being removed because many national elements were removed. And then here's the state data set rules, or excuse me, the EMS data set rules. So here you can go through and review these. Here, for example, you can see where we've taken that one pattern Schematron file that dealt with the order of times, and here's the atomic look, right? So now the message that's thrown to our providers will be specific to that time element that they've recorded that seems to be non-congruous with, for example, when they were en route and when they arrived. So you can read through these, make sure the language sounds kind of intelligible, and if this is the proper way to go. And the list is a little bit longer. Those rules we now have about 172. But I feel really good about the list. We've gone through each of these in great detail. This, as I mentioned, is the narrative pieces. And our next step will be to build the underlying program to support these rules. And so if you have comments about, wow, this rule is too confining, or it's too liberal, or this text doesn't really make good sense to me as to why this rule would be thrown, any of those comments like that would help us as we begin to finalize the programming that underlies these changes. So any questions associated with the rollout of these candidate business rules?
For those times, are you going to be pulling the description dynamically, or is it hard coded?
The structure of the Schematron file will remain the same. So how you access and use the text is kind of vendor specific. Is that your question, David?
I think so, because the current structure lets us override that if we need to. Because we match up the element with the description. If for some reason we need to show a different descriptor for that element, currently we can. I just wasn't sure if these, like unit left seen, date, time, could be overridden.
Yeah, the structure will be exactly the same. Thanks, David. Any other questions about the candidate schematron files for 3.5? I will mention, of course, that there are rules that are now associated with new elements. So the e-disposition section, I'll kind of move down here. So clearly we've added some additional elements into the e-disposition section. You haven't been able to really see that section yet, right? That's the work that Laurel is completing on the data dictionary. That's almost complete. But if you want to review these and you want to take a look at, for example, what e-disposition 25 and 24 looks like, you can always go over here and just choose the item where this new variable was discussed and actually go and take a look at the request for change and then how that element was changed. And my screen's being very, very finicky. So if there's an element that you're not sure what it looks like in version 3.5, you can always go to the JIRA item that was associated with that new element or that change, and there you'll be able to get a good feel for what that element looks like. And then hopefully in the next couple of weeks you'll be able to review this in regards to the full data dictionary for 3.5. All right, so any questions related to these new asserts?
So Clay, before we transition to the next topic, we received a question in the chat.
Oh,
was there a specific question for the tangible software costs discussion? So would you be able to address that, Clay?
Oh, sure. Sure. Yeah. No real question. I was just hoping to let folks know that we're receiving those questions. We, of course, always receive those questions and are happy to receive them. But we, as I mentioned, we're in this industry together. We need to, of course, ensure that this remains an economical market that allows us to continue to do the great work and collect all the records that we do collect. But there really wasn't a question here. I was asked by NHTSA just to ensure that the question is not asked. That's not our place, but we're receiving questions. People have, I think, displaced fear about this just because they haven't communicated with their current vendors or future vendors about these ideas. So really there was no question other than to let folks know that that vendors should communicate with their users about that topic. Does that address the question in the chat? All right. Okay, great. Any other questions about the Schematron rules? All right, fantastic. We'll work in the next couple of days to get those up on the website. Just follow, as I mentioned, the link that's found on the opening page, and you'll be able to access those. All right, Lisa, I'll turn it over to you for the last item.
Great. Thanks, Clay. So we are scheduled for the NEMSIS annual implementation meeting for August 12th and 13th. And you guys have heard me talk about this a few times, but I'll just share some same and some additional details. It'll be held at the Silver Baron in Deer Valley, just like last year. So we received a lot of positive feedback about that particular venue. So we're pleased to be able to do it again in the same place. We hope we have better weather this time so that we can take advantage of the Park Mountain Resort activities on Monday night. And since you have paid for this already from last year's registration, there would not be an additional cost for that. Bridget's working hard on all the many details for planning this great meeting, and we're also continuing to develop the agenda, which will be largely or exclusively around the 350 changes. And then that information, as soon as we have completed it, will be posted on our website, and then we'll also share it out via email on the various group lists and listservs, probably in the next month or so. Does anyone have any questions about the meeting?
If those dates are set in stone, could you put something on the website to formally say this is the dates? It still says about the 2018 meeting.
Sure, we did post, but we'll make it more prominent. We did post something on Laurel. Oh, Laurel's not here anymore. On the main banner page.
I'm here, Lisa.
Oh, you're here, Laurel? Okay. Okay, so maybe, Laurel, could we maybe find, I know we didn't save the date.
For this.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for the feedback.
It is in the banner. It's just, I guess it's the third item, so it's not super prominent.
Okay.
Yeah, I've gotten used to kind of ignoring that, so I had no idea, but thanks.
Good to know. I'm trying to work on keeping it more up to date. It's been we've really let it get stale a couple of times, but I'm going to try and update it at least every couple of weeks.
Yeah, you guys will keep us on our toes. So Laura will keep this updated regularly, and we'll put some good information in there. But we will we'll also post it more prominently, and likely have a page for it that will start populating with helpful information.
Okay, yeah, that would be helpful for me to get them to buy tickets and stuff.
Yeah, you got it. All right. Anybody else? Okay, back to you, Clay. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Yeah, I'll just mention two more items that are going to be on the agenda, and we're hoping to have some work groups this summer that will help us to lock down these two issues. Folks will remember we've continued to do work on what we're calling the NEMSIS suggested list. That's for those elements that utilize long national standards like ICD-10. We've decided not to include those lists in the standards, so Laurel can finish her work in regards to the development of the XSDs, and we'll have all those products rolled out in the candid release. That still allows us to spend some time this summer to try to lock down exactly what we're going to add to those lists and exactly how we want as an industry to use them. Still, as states are finding, it's almost impossible to work through the current data as it's currently coming in, so we're going to hopefully solve that. And then the other issue that we'll make good movement on with a continued work group is the e-outcomes section topic. Our latest discussions with the vendors there is we're certainly going to drop with 3.5 some elements in any outcome, but the idea of a freestanding implementation guide that provides some universality for the sharing of data, at least from our side of the industry, we'll continue to nail that down this summer and hopefully be able to have some tangible products and discussions by the time of the fall meeting to discuss. HIE continues to be an important area for us, and I think it's valuable for us to come up with some standardization from our end to kind of improve and kind of grease the wheels for the sharing and exchange of health information. So those will be two topics that'll be very important on the meeting that will be held in the fall. All right, that is the end of our agenda. Are there other items from those on the call that you'd like to discuss on the call? We have a little bit of time left for our formal time. Is there any additional comments or topics? Okay, anything that you'd like us to work on before the next call? Some topics you'd like us to prepare for discussion on the next call? All right, well, always feel like you can contact us folks here at the NEMSIS TAC. We'd love to hear from you if you have any thoughts or comments. We very much appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us on the call, and we'll look forward to speaking with you again on the next call it looks like the next call will be April 10th. Thank you, everyone.